Before I wanted to take care of a few housekeeping tasks. First, I wanted to thank our partners for continuing to support our endeavors here at the center, the Sovereign Nation of the Kokopah, Forward.us, the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family, GTL Enterprises, and Management Training Corporation. Together, we rise. As a reminder, Arizona State University is on Pacific time, and therefore today's presentations are all listed on the schedule in Pacific time. For the most part, our presentations today will not be recorded unless at the request of the panelists. You may have just heard the announcement that this one will be recorded. For the most part, though, they are not being recorded. We're also asking that as our panelists are giving their presentations, if you have questions, to please use the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom box. Let's utilize chat for discussion, but if you have questions specifically for the panelists, utilize the Q&A box, and I will ask those questions of our panelists near the end of their presentation. And with that, welcome to session 1. This is Seeing and Supporting Children with Incarcerated Parents, promoting educational success and well-being. Our panelists today are Jaquila Foster from Project What, Addie Norris from Project What, Synovia Scudder from SUSU Youth Team Advisor, Alyssa Tambora, Walls to Bridges Project and BASIP Steering Committee, Anya Young, author of Teen Guide to Living with Incarcerated Parents, and this panel will be moderated by Allison Holohan from the New York Initiative from Children of Incarcerated Parents. Allison, I will let you get started.
Welcome to Education Day. We thank Arizona State University for convening the State of Incarceration Summit, and we're really honored to start the day. And Melinda, thank you for all you've done to organize this amazing conference and for wearing so many hats to bring this important discussion into our virtual worlds. It is unfortunate that we could not be together in person for the Center for Child Wellbeing's National Children of Incarcerated Parents Conference this year, but we're really grateful for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Allison Holohan, and I'm the Senior Policy Manager for the New York Initiative for Children of Incarcerated Parents, or NYCIP, which is a special project of the Osborne Association's Center for Justice Across Generations, and I'll be moderating today's panel. The Osborne Association is a New York-based nonprofit that provides supportive services for people who are incarcerated in New York State prisons and New York City jails. We offer reentry services and provide supportive programming for children and families with incarcerated loved ones. And our policy center is dedicated to building a justice system that promotes healing, safety, responsibility, and well-being across generations. NYCIP is a statewide partnership of people with lived experience, community-based organizations, partners from city and state government agencies across New York, advocates, and members of the faith-based community. Collectively, we promote policies and practices to better support children whose parents are involved in the criminal legal system from the point of arrest through reentry in New York State and beyond. To give you a sense of what we do, I'll share a recent hard-fought legislative victory. In July, the New York State Legislature passed a bill which would require the New York State Department of Corrections to place incarcerated parents of minor children in the state prison closest to their children. While the governor still needs to sign the bill when it comes across his desk, we are encouraged that the bill will become law and children will finally have better access to their incarcerated parents who are so often placed in prisons hundreds of miles away from home. We are thrilled that the State of Incarceration Summit coincides with the 6th annual See Us Support Us Month, or SUSU, which we hold every October. SUSU is a month of awareness raising to increase visibility of and supports for children and young people whose parents are involved in the criminal legal system. Through the course of our work, we cannot tell you how many times we've met with principals and teachers, probation department directors, heads of city and state agencies, and many others to discuss the needs of children with incarcerated parents, only to be told we don't have those children here, but we know that they do. Over 2.7 million children have an incarcerated parent on any given day, and over 10 million have experienced the incarceration of a parent at some point in their childhood. To stop and think about that, that is a lot of young people. As you will hear today, the experience stays with you into adulthood, and for some, the incarceration of a parent lasts well into adulthood too. And as many of you know or learned during last week's summit, structural racism is baked into our criminal legal system, which means that children of color experience the incarceration of a parent at even higher rates than white children. 1 in 9 African-American children, 1 in 28 Hispanic children, compared to 1 in 57 white children experience the incarceration of a parent on any given day. Because children who have experienced the incarceration of a parent are largely invisible, we launched SIA Support Us in 2015 to change that. What started in New York State is now a national month of awareness, and we are grateful for this year's National SUSU partners, the National Resource Center for Children and Families of the Incarcerated, the Bay Area Children of Incarcerated Partnership, which is BASIP, We Got Us Now, Pops the Club, Kids Mates, Daughters Beyond Incarceration, the Connecticut Children of Incarcerated Parents Initiative, the many SUSU advisors that I wish I had time to shout out, and the SUSU youth team, we appreciate you. This year, SUSU is focusing on supporting children's educational success and well-being from early childhood through college. SUSU also invites educators to reimagine school safety without police. For some youth who witness a parent's arrest or have had negative experiences with correctional officers, seeing police at school every day can be triggering. And SUSU offers tips and strategies for everyone, including families, about how to see and support children with incarcerated parents. Most importantly, SUSU celebrates the accomplishments and creative talents of young people and can be an affirming space for young people who too often feel that they're the only one who has an incarcerated parent. Please visit the SUSU website to learn more. I'm gonna drop the link in the chat box briefly, along with our social media handles. NYSIP is honored to open Education Day, and I am humbled to moderate this morning's discussion with Addie, Anye, Alyssa, Jakayla, and Synovia. It is critical for our day to begin with hearing from them about how best to support them. Throughout the day, you will learn how to build upon what you hear this morning, and our hope is that you will end your day with not only a better understanding of this experience, but with concrete strategies and ideas for how to strengthen your work with children and families and your interactions with your peers and family. We will have time for a Q&A at the end, so please submit your questions in the Q&A box. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our esteemed panelists who will share a bit about themselves. So Jakayla, will you please start us off?
Thank you, and hello everyone. Like was mentioned, my name is Jakayla Foster. I am a program coordinator for Project What. Project What is a youth-led advocacy group and leadership development program for children of incarcerated parents. We work with youth between the ages of 12 to 18, and we help them develop their skills around facilitation, but we also help them figure out what are their true emotions around how they feel being the child of an incarcerated parent and what it is that they want to spread awareness around that for. I myself also was in the program when I was a young person. So when I was 15, I joined the program and I stayed in the program all the way up until I was in my senior year of high school. I graduated, I went to college for a few years. They kind of just couldn't get rid of me at Project What because I was still very much active with the program and trying to still be a part of the advocacy work that was going on. So I ended up becoming a program coordinator for the program, and I've been there for almost 4 years now. Project What has helped me in addition to a lot of other people in my family, because with my father's incarceration, it wouldn't just impact me and my 2 siblings, it would impact a lot of the other youth in my family because he was seen as the father figure for a lot of them. So his incarceration played a huge role in like me developing my career path, which is restorative justice work and fighting against mass incarceration. Me and my dad are working on our relationship, but I'll save the rest of that for later.
Hi, I'm Eddie Norris. I'm a member of Project What. I have been for 3 years now. I'm a junior in high school, and I joined Project What because my mother thought it would be good for me to talk with people who had experienced the same things that I have. And I stayed because I do enjoy being with the people at Project What. And my relationship with my dad, who was incarcerated when I was 7, is a normal father-son relationship.
Thanks, Addie. Do you mind sharing just a little, maybe an example of something that Project What has worked on recently so the audience knows what great work you're doing?
Sure. Right now, we're planning for a youth summit. I'm not sure if we've decided on the exact date, but I'm looking forward to it.
Great, thank you.
And the youth summit will take place sometime in November.
Fabulous. Alyssa?
Hi, can you hear me okay? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Marie Tambora. I am an adult child of a formerly incarcerated parent. My father was incarcerated from when I was about 9 to about 23. So I do have direct experience with parental incarceration. I am a student at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm graduating this year, finally. Woo! Also headed to law school. Really excited about that. Woo! Another one. I'm the founding director of the Walls to Bridges project. Our project focuses on fostering communication between those who are incarcerated and their families. Most recently, we launched a book project over the summer where we mail books to children as presents on behalf of their incarcerated family, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I also chair the Bay Area Children of Incarcerated Parents Partnership, which is a regional coalition connecting the Bay Area counties to come together and provide advocacy and collaboration around advancing the rights of children and their incarcerated parents.
Thanks, Alyssa. Anya?
Hi, my name's Anya. I'm 18. I am a sophomore at the University of Southern California, and I'm also an author. I am a scholarships recipient, and I volunteer with fam.org and We Got Us Now. Yeah, but I'm an author, so the book that I wrote was called Teen Guide to Living with Incarcerated Parents. I published that book when I was around like 16, 17. And yeah, that's all I have for now.
Thanks, Anya. Synovia?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here. My name is Synovia Scudder. I'm a recent graduate of Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey. And yeah, I am the founding member of the Youth Empowerment Program at Rowan University, which is a college for college students who have been impacted by parental incarceration. And through that, I've met Allison. I've attended the conference for children of incarcerated parents. I've conducted research and done all of that. I'm also fortunate enough to be the CS Supporters Youth Advisor this year, working with these amazing youth. Shout out to you guys if you're watching. And we've been discussing how to better support students who are impacted by parental incarceration. So.
And Zenobia, do you want to introduce the video?
Sure. So this year we've been working on a do's and don'ts list, which is basically things people have come to us and approached us with. And instead of doing this, we have other suggestions that educators, peers, and others can use. So.
Fabulous, thank you. And I'm really excited to share with you all the world premiere of the SUSU Youth Team Do's and Don'ts.
As children of incarcerated parents, we are often asked about our parents' incarceration. 9 times out of 10, we are approached wrong and become uncomfortable.
Here are tips from our first-hand experience.
Do not put us on the spot or in an uncomfortable situation. Instead, avoid re-traumatization by picking up on our body language and cues that show we do not want to talk about it. Do not ask why my parent is incarcerated or how long they'll be there. Instead, understand that it is not easy to talk about. Give me my privacy.
Do not treat me differently because of my parents' experience. Instead, treat me the same as my peers and believe in my ability to achieve greatness just as everyone else.
Do not try to relate to my experience. My experience is my own. If I feel comfortable enough to say, yeah, my dad is in jail right now, don't reply with, oh, I feel that. My parents are divorced, so I don't see my dad that often either. Instead, listen, offer me programs and resources, or don't try to relate at all.
Do not minimize my experience. Instead, ask me how I'm feeling and understand that my feelings are valid.
Do not ask questions like, are you afraid to become incarcerated like your parent? Instead, reassure us that we are our own person. Give us positive affirmations.
Do not use words like criminal or felon. Instead, be mindful of your language and replace it with incarcerated person or justice-involved individuals.
For more information on how to support children of incarcerated parents, join the CS Support Us Network and follow us on social media. And remember, CS Support Us, join SUSU.
Awesome job, Zenobia and youth team. I want to give a shout out to the youth team members, which is Kat from Pops the Club, Josh and Ava from Kids Mates, Zenobia, Anthony from the Osborne Association's Youth Action Council, and Genesis from Youth Experience Success at the Osborne Association. I'm really grateful for you all informing us and guiding SUSU. And I learn from you every time I get to hang out with you. So well done. So I would like to hear from the panelists. Some have seen the video before and some this is their first time at the world premiere. What you thought about the do's and don'ts. Is there anything that really resonated with you?
I think the part about other people trying to relate their experience when they've never experienced anything even close to it. Like, I can't tell you the amount of times I've been told, oh yeah, my dad's not really in my life. My parents are together. Oh, cool. That's it doesn't compare. Like your parent can still come into your life as they please, when they want to, if they want to. But my dad wouldn't be able to see me if he wanted to. My dad wouldn't be able to, come to these important events from my high school or from my, middle school, even if he wanted to. And I think that's like a key difference there. And like, to even see that parent, you have to go through so many things that just in and of itself it's traumatizing. Like walking into a prison cell, like not the prison cell, but walking through the gates and going through these metal detectors, and like people don't take all of that into account. So that really resonated with me. And then like the end, whether we're talking about like how to refer to that person. And honestly, like some people just forget to just say like, oh, how's your dad? this is still a human being. This is still a person that has a role in my life. You can say that they're my dad. You can say that they're, my mom. You can say like, this is my brother, my sister. Like, they're still, their role. That's not going to be taken away from them. They're still part of my family.
Yeah, that's so important, Anya. And I invite the audience, if there's going to do one thing today, one easy thing to do, although we hope you do many, is to think about the language that you use, because words really matter, as Anya just shared. And if you go to the SUSU website, we even have a digital postcard that you can download and share with your peers. You can share with other teachers in your school, with everybody, to really emphasize how important it is to use humanizing language. Any other thoughts about the video?
I have a couple of thoughts. I also liked the try not to relate to our experiences, and Anya said it perfectly, the feelings that come up when people try to compare. There's just no comparison. There just really isn't. And the other thing I really liked about the video was saying to not ask us what our parent did to become incarcerated. That I think is extremely important, especially if we want to disentangle like the stigma with parental incarceration, because I am not, the crime that my father committed. I am not his incarceration. My experience does not, it is not hinged on his incarceration and what he did, even though it does affect me. It does not define me, and so yeah, I see you, Synovia. So I really think that that is something that's very important, not just for educators, but for other kids, that are in school, other adults that might just come across children, whether it's like, your friends or someone in a community program, like no matter who the kid is and how you know them, it's just a pretty blanket, simple thing. Don't even ask. Like it's okay if you're curious. Like I think most of us are gonna be curious when we hear things like that, but at the same time, acknowledging that really it's none of your business. And when you do ask, it's re-traumatizing the child. So I really like that, and also the language. And I think that this is one of the things that we can all do in very small ways, because if we're here today listening, odds are we've probably come across organizations or people that care about those who are incarcerated. And I've met so many like well-meaning people who have used the word inmates just in like their newsletters, right? Or just in like the name of a program they're trying to create, and trying to steer them away and say, hey, there's a movement to really shift that language when you're sending out that newsletter or you're talking about that person. Can you just change your language from inmate to incarcerated person? Or it's an extra word, it takes up space, but you know what, it's worth it. So that's all I gotta say.
Thanks, Alyssa. And both of you have mentioned stigma, and so I want to turn to thinking about how you experience that. There's been some recent research that has shown that when teachers have found out that a student has an incarcerated parent, that their expectations for that student are lower. Whether that's something that is unconscious bias happening in most cases, or whether it's conscious, it's definitely something that children are experiencing. And so I'm wondering, have you experienced stigma because you've had an incarcerated parent? And if yes, do you talk about the stigma? Do you even talk about having an incarcerated parent?
It's sort of hard to have that conversation with other people who aren't in that same situation, because all they can do is imagine what that's like. They'll never be able to truly understand like the day-to-day experience that comes with having an incarcerated parent. And like that's not their fault, but it's another reason for them to be a little bit more considerate. And personally, like throughout middle school, high school, like my father's been incarcerated since I was 9 years old. and he's serving a 12-year prison sentence. And when I tell people that, like, even if it's like, it can be my friends, it could be, you know, other adults, it could be teachers, a lot of times I'll get this question like, oh, what did he do? And we just talked about that. You don't need to know. And I feel like this question is precisely just a good example of that stigma, because it's like, hi, so your parent has been incarcerated for 12 years. Give me a reason to justify that. Give me a reason to say, okay, well, he did this, so it's okay. And like, mass incarceration is a problem that we've had going on for decades, ever since, you know, the abolishment of slavery. The prison system was created literally to drive Black people back into that system of slavery. It is a modern form of slavery. And I didn't share anything about, you know, my parent being in prison until after my book was released, because then I had no choice. My school wanted to do a newspaper, a school newspaper on me, like an article. And I didn't even, you know, go to tell these people like, hey, I wrote a book. They kind of just found out because I kind of did go on the news. And I didn't really think about that. I was like, wait, no, you know, these kids, they don't watch the news. And then little did I know, somebody watched the news. And, you know, some teachers went around and told the, you know, the students, oh, why don't you, you know, write about this student? They wrote a book. Next thing I knew, I was getting a text message saying, oh, can you talk to me about your book? And I'm like, how'd you know? I don't like that. But like, that just goes to show, like, I wasn't able to share this until like my senior year of high school, because I was afraid of what people might think, because knowing the stigma that I was already facing, having, like, being, you know, raised in a single parent household, I was like, oh, I'm not even gonna go there. You know, the amount of times that I've been to, like, you know, these, you know, conferences where, you know, your parents are, I guess, like, supposed to show up, right? And my dad's in prison. I'm not going to tell them my dad's in prison. My mom works until like 7:30. This, you know, this meeting happens at 5. She can't make it. Instead, I would be like, hey, my mom's working, my dad can't. And then more often than not, the response that I would get from the teachers would be like, okay. Excuse me? Like, this, my mom was literally all that I had. Like, and like, to be judged for, you know, my mother not being able to come in because she's working to pay all the bills to raise me on her own, that, like, that did it for me. I was like, okay, yeah, I don't feel comfortable sharing this information with my teachers. They don't make me feel like I can.
Thanks, Anya. Addie, do you want to share a bit about whether you have told anybody at your school about when your parent was incarcerated?
So when I was in middle school, going into high school, there was this private high school that I wanted to go to, and I got accepted, but then they found out what my dad did, and then they rejected me. So I ended up going to a different high school. And then now at my current high school, the only one who knows that I'm a SIP and what my dad did is the principal.
And what was your decision making around only telling the principal, and why did you even tell the principal after your the prior experience where you weren't able to get into the school because of your dad's incarceration?
Well, because of the nature of what my dad did, the principal was going to find out whether I wanted to or not. But the principal has kept it to himself, and I've stated that I like it that way.
Mm-hmm. So Addie, you felt like you had no choice but to tell the principal. It wasn't like you went to tell the principal just so that you had some support. It was because you felt like you had to.
Yes.
Zenobia, can you share a bit about your experience with sharing that you have had incarcerated parents?
Yeah, definitely felt stigma when people found out that I was impacted by maternal incarceration as well as paternal incarceration. You know, in Black and Brown communities, most times it's kind of normalized to have like a father incarcerated and to not speak about it. So whenever I spoke about it or whenever people found out like, oh, your mother's incarcerated, and you know, I've been impacted by parental incarceration since the age of 1 until about I was 16, like in and out of jail and prison, both of them. So, you know, usually in these communities, you have a mother who's the main caregiver, the nurturer, the breadwinner for most households. So whenever, you know, my mother didn't show up to PTA meetings or dropping off candies and whatever for parties, people are like, Zenobia, where's your mother? And that is like resonated in my head, like people asking me that. Like I wrote a college essay about it. Like that was my whole like personal statement because that stuck with me. Like people asking like, where's your mother? Specifically, not even about like my father, but yeah, people just assume that whatever she did was terrible for her to leave the family and for her to go through that lifestyle. And, you know, that stigma falls on me. They're like, you must not have been raised right. And it's like what Alyssa was saying, like, I'm separate from my parents' incarceration. Like, I'm nothing like her. And thankfully so, like, she, you know, she still has an important part of my life. Like, she's been out and clean for like the last 6 years. So go her. But yeah, definitely face some stigma because of that.
So for you, you kind of had like a double layer of stigma because you felt that the incarceration of a parent was stigmatizing enough. And then once people found out that it was your mom, they were even more judgmental. And thinking about what you have shared about the stigma and, you know, Anya, go back to you when you shared how your teachers responded to you or how people respond saying, what did your dad do? I'd like to hear from you all, like, you know, what would be the responses that people could have for you that would feel supportive when they learn or you disclose? You know, what would make you feel like you're heard and affirmed and not judged?
I would say, to speak to my experience, both as a college student with an incarcerated parent and also as a young person, what I wanted to be asked was as simple as, what could I do for you, or do you need anything from me? Mainly because it, like everyone else spoke to previously, it just takes a huge toll when they just assume that you do or do not need whatever it is that they come up with in your head. And majority of the time, it's not even a need. It's just being comfortable enough to share that information and not feel like you're going to be looked at as like the bad egg or whatever the case may be. So yeah, just honoring that that information was shared with you and just asking me, what do you need, or if you need anything from me, what is that?
I think like even right now, like some of my friends don't even get this, you know, like they know that my dad's still incarcerated. I get a call from him for 15 minutes a week. Like that I'm not even gonna get into that one because it really just, oh my God. But I think that like one thing that people can do to be more supportive is just, you know, I don't know, ask how my dad is. Ask how I'm doing. Ask how my caregivers are doing. These are all people that are still a part of my village. And it's like, they're more than what they've done. They're more than just like, oh, they get off at 7:30. They call for 15 minutes a week. They're incarcerated. I can't tell you, I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've been asked how my dad is. That says a lot. It says a lot. And my friends don't really get this because I guess, it doesn't like directly affect them, but like if they maybe every once in a while, reached out and said, how is your dad? How is he doing? Then that would spark up a conversation of like, this is what's going on. Like, you could get a little bit more information about how a human being is handling himself in prison. And I think, especially now with the times that we're in, where people are dying on the streets, these can be someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's cousin, someone's niece, nephew. And it's like, what about like, the family members that are probably in cells right now having to get calls about how their family members are dropping dead on the streets because of police. No one really takes that into account. These are still human beings that still have to go through everyday human experiences. Death is one of them. So I think that the number one way to be supportive is just to acknowledge that this is also still a human being. Yes, they are incarcerated. Yes, they did something wrong. Okay, cool. But you also have to realize that like not all of the laws that are in place right now are necessarily just like, oh, if you do this, you're a terrible person. They were created by human beings at the end of the day. All of the laws are created by human beings. And really we're kind of just, making it up as we go along, And I think that like, the questions like, oh, what did they do? Like, how about, what are you looking forward to when they get out? When's the last time you sent them pictures? What did you send them? What did your dad talk about in the most recent letter? Like, what, like those kinds of questions would be that would be a relief to hear from people,
Thank you, Anya. Any other tips or suggestions? Yeah.
Yeah, from personal experience, I think trying to help relieve the stress of caregivers and the child and whomever, kind of like what Anya was saying. It's kind of hard for parents who have to deal with this, whether they're the primary caregiver and working 10 plus hours a day and then have young kids. So whether that be like, okay, let me take so-and-so to a college tour, let me take them to acceptance students day, or, she had a long week, so let me take the kids to the park for her so she could, have some time to herself. I know for me, my church family relieved a lot of the stress of my caregiver. My caregiver was working Monday through Friday, taking care of a sick elderly woman and 3 other kids. So for me, I didn't have the opportunity to go to college tours and stuff like that without the help of my church family. They took me to tour around New Jersey to go look for schools, or take me on Sundays to, make me feel kind of normal again, like feel like a normal kid, like give me those experience. They drove me to sleepaway camps when my aunt couldn't because she didn't drive. So just being there to relieve stress if possible, and not kind of like forcing your way in, but like if it's the little things, do you need me to go to the store to pick up some groceries? Because I know you're running around the house taking care of these kids. You know what I mean? Definitely that.
So I'm hearing that support not only is what Anya shared, which is just saying, hey, how are you doing? How is your parent doing? but it's also the actions, right? It's the little things, like show your support by doing something, ask what families need, and support everybody and not just the child. Any other thoughts on what support looks like?
Yeah, so my preference is a little bit different because my friends know, a lot of the friends that I've had for a while know about my dad's situation, and like our unspoken rule is that don't talk about it unless I do. And I'm really lucky because I've never that rule has never been spoken. They've never talked about it unless I have. And it's what I like. Being treated like what my dad did is not a factor.
Thanks, Addie. And I'm really glad that you shared that you had a bit of a different perspective, because I want the audience to be mindful that children who've experienced parental incarceration, young adults who experience parental incarceration, they're all individual, unique people, right? It's not one big monolith, and what works is not like one size fits all. And so we really need to keep that in mind and to honor the unique differences, and also understand that there are times when there are some similarities. And also, Addie, really important that you point out that it's okay not to talk about it. You know, I feel like educators and counselors really put a lot of pressure on young people, like, what's wrong, what's going on, right? And sometimes it's okay not to talk about it and just to sit with a young person and just be consistent and be there, so that if they decide they do want to talk about it, you're there for them. Does that sound that resonates with some of you? So what should people who work in schools and after school programs know about supporting young people whose parents have either been arrested or subsequently incarcerated? You know, thinking about going into your elementary school, your high school, and in college, you know, how can schools create a safe, affirming environment for you?
Well, being as though I work with Project What, the main thing that I try to encourage people to know about people whose parents have been incarcerated, there we go, um, are that these young people have real life experiences, and they have issues outside of whatever it is that we're asking them to come and condense their brain down into. And so one of the biggest things that myself and Oscar do with our youth are that we let them have the freedom of being a child, but we also still try to honor those experiences. So to make that sound a little bit more better is that our program is youth led. So everything that we do within our program, the ideas come from the youth, the themes around whatever we're doing come from the youth. If they feel like something that my Oscar or myself presented just does not sit right, they have the final say in everything, and their voices always are at the forefront. So especially when I'm doing panels and just publicly speaking on my personal experience, and I'm with a Project What youth, as you may have noticed, I try my best not to be the first one to answer. I do talk a lot, so that's another piece into it. But it's very important for me, knowing that the work that I do and being an adult in this field, is that it's important that I do not take up a lot of the space, knowing that there are young people who are still going through this currently in their youth years. And then the second one is to know that it's not up to you to like say it's all going to be okay, it's going to be okay. Like that's something that the youth, all of my youth within Project What tell me, is that that's their biggest pet peeve, is when they're told everything's going to be okay, because the reality of it is that it's not going to be okay, and you don't really even know the depth of whatever the situation is that that young person is going through. It's going to be okay is the phrase that causes a lot of our youth to just shut off and just try to stop trying to share out what it is that's going on. And also is to try to develop some type of curriculum around incarceration that doesn't stigmatize anyone involved, whether it be the victim, whether it be the the loved one that is incarcerated or the family members that are affected on both sides. That's something that our youth have been doing with San Francisco County Schools. And that helps because that, number one, just helps the students know that incarceration is a topic that my school is talking about, and it's being talked about in a way that doesn't necessarily make me feel comfortable to share my experience, but it lets me know that my school isn't like ignorant and isn't trying to further stigmatize me and my experiences, because that's something that once Project What started to go into schools and hold meetings with youth, and not just meetings, but just leave our posters and stickers and bookmarks, is just showing that the school is aware of the fact that children of incarcerated parents is a group that is within these schools. Mainly because you'll go to a resource center or a counselor's office and you'll see resources for foster youth, resources for youth who have been through physical abuse, resources for youth who feel like they're mentally just not available to be performing properly in schools. But you never see anything about children of incarcerated parents. So that's my main thing, is that's the bare minimum that that after school program workers in schools can do, is to make sure that it's known that this is a conversation that we're aware of and that we're not ignorant to the things that come with it.
Listening to Jakayla makes me think, Anya, what would it have been like for you if you were not yourself but saw your book that you wrote in the school library or a classroom? Like, how would it feel if there were books in schools by and about children who've experienced parental incarceration?
I think I wouldn't have felt like so isolated and like just alone, because it wasn't until after I published like my book that I found out about like all these organizations that are dedicated to helping children of incarcerated parents. And that says a lot. Like I was like 16, 17. My dad had been incarcerated since I was 9. So like that's a good chunk of time that went by before I found any kind of support outside of my household. And like, if something like that was just like at least offered like within my school, or like, you know, it would have been like a great topic to like maybe talk about during, you know, the NSL government that everyone has to take like their sophomore year or something. Like that would have been nice. Maybe during the US history class that like literally everyone also takes. I think that would have been like very valuable information for me to know that there are resources out there. And, you know, even if, you know, if I weren't me, if I weren't a child of incarcerated parent, at least for me to know like, okay, this is, you know, these are works that I can refer to learn more, to go deeper, to understand a little bit more. And you know, not offering stuff like that, it's perpetuating this system that like allows people to stay ignorant because they're like, oh well, I never heard about it. But if you put it in their faces and you're like, hey, these are, you know, books that you can, you know, read, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, yeah, we're going to talk about the amendments, but let's do a little sidebar here and talk about what the 13th Amendment really means. Let's talk about the statistics that are being shown. 1 in 3 Black men will experience incarceration in their lifetime. That's a very big percentage. That's 33%. Let's talk about how it disproportionately affects people of color. Let's talk about, you know, what children of incarcerated parents are doing now, how they're turning around for themselves, what kind of, you know, issues that they're facing. And I think if we had had that conversation, I would have been I probably would have been like a better student. Like I would have been a little bit more comfortable talking about things. Or, you know, if I didn't want to, I'd also feel comfortable not talking about it. But like in the position that I was in, it was like, it's uncomfortable not to talk about it. It's also uncomfortable not to talk about it, you know? So it's like, do I say something? Do I not? Either way, I'm gonna feel bad. So I think that's something that could have been done differently. And I think if there were like programs that actually allowed children of incarcerated parents to like know one another, that would
Like
have been
Project
really
what?
helpful. Yeah, that would have been very helpful. That would have been very, very helpful. I didn't find like, I didn't get to like meet people that were my age that were children of incarcerated parents until like scholarships. Um, I went to like the induction ceremony where you get your scholarship, and I saw maybe like one other person that went to my school, had no idea that like she was going through the same thing. And after that, one other person came up to me like from my school, and he told me like he was also going through the same thing. But it would have been nice to have like a safe space to get together and like talk about it, because it's different to talk about it with people that actually understand what you're going through rather than to talk about it with someone who, you know, can only imagine what you're going through. They can only sit there and say, "Oh, like things are going to be okay," which I get told that a lot. I get told that a lot, and it's very annoying. I'm going to be very blunt. It's very annoying. Please stop, because like the current situation isn't okay. So it's not going to be okay. Like this doesn't all, just magically, not become a thing and it's just not a big deal anymore once they're out. No, they missed out on a very big chunk of my life. That's a big deal for me. And by saying it's all going to be okay, I don't think people understand how they're belittling the situation, how they're writing off your feelings and dismissing you. It's very dismissive when you say, "Oh, it's going to be okay." And what do you say to that? I don't have a response for you. Any response that I give you now is going to paint this picture for you that I'm just a negative person. And it's going to just allow you to have this image in your head of children of incarcerated parents that, oh, they're negative people. They don't want to do better. They don't want to succeed, whatever. Like stuff like that. Like there's no right answer. Like any answer that I give you, you're not going to be happy with it. Don't tell me it's all going to be okay, because it's not okay. The system itself is corrupt. None of this is okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Anya. And for the educators out there and anybody who works with young people, you can check out the SUSU Educator Resource Toolkit. It's got a book list, and some of those books on there do speak about mass incarceration. Michelle Alexander just re-released a young adult version of the new Jim Crow, which Anya touched upon, and some of her comments around prison being the modern slavery and the 13th. So it's a great way to bring conversations about mass incarceration into the classroom, right? Also, there's some areas or some resources for how you can find local programs. Pops the Club has support groups in some schools. If you're interested, you can reach out to Pops the Club and even start your own Pops the Club in your school. Look for after-school programs like Project What, where young people who've all experienced parental incarceration can be together, and as Anya said, like they kind of understand each other. So thanks for all of that, Anya. It was really informative. Alyssa, I know that you've had some negative and positive experiences with teachers and educators. Can you share a bit?
Sure. Okay, now can you hear me? I switched to headphones. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll share just like really quickly, I guess, on some negative and positive experiences I had. So I'm 27 now. I'm a senior at UC Santa Cruz, and my father was incarcerated when I was 9. And so I feel like I have a lot of varying different experiences in my educational journey when it comes to sharing about having an incarcerated parent and the support and like not support that I got from my educators. I actually found out my father was sentenced to 15 years in prison as I was being dropped off for school, actually. And it was a very challenging experience. I was arguing with my mom, actually, and she dropped me off at school, and she said, "Okay, well, since you keep bugging me because you want to know when your father's coming home, he's coming home in 15 years, right? Like, I didn't really have a supportive caregiver at home either, which was a lot of my story. And so I got out of the car and I just started crying. And I went to my classroom and a teacher asked me what was wrong. And I said, I just found out my dad's not coming home for 15 years. And they kind of just, they didn't know what to say. They just looked at me with this like look of shock on their face, and we're like, okay, well, just come into the classroom. And they ushered me into the classroom, gave me some tissues, started the school day, and literally never brought it up ever again. And I like that, Allison, that you brought up that we all have different experiences as children of incarcerated parents. Our experiences can be so different and our needs are so different, and they're intersectional. There are children of color who are children of incarcerated parents. There are white children that are children of incarcerated parents. There are children that, may be wealthy, disproportionately that's not the case, but, they're kids that may have money for resources, kids that might not, kids who have supportive guardians or caregivers at home, kids that don't, kids that have substance abuse issues. There's just the intersectionality of our experiences is so deep, and the overlap is massive. And so for me, I actually would have loved if I had that person say, hey, you told me this thing, is there some way I can follow up with you? That was an instance where, like, you don't just not say something, at least for me. Like, they literally never brought it up again. And I struggled in school, and I had behavioral problems, and I couldn't stay focused. And my educators did not step up to support me. And I definitely fell through the cracks of our education system. I ended up dropping out of high school. I got pregnant in high school. I was homeless in high school. I really, really struggled. And educators did not support me, and it was really frustrating, growing up feeling like you need support but people aren't paying attention. And I guess for the educators that are listening on this call, if you see a child slipping, you see them failing, you see them falling, like, that's your cue to step in and not to step back. And I know it's uncomfortable. And I know it's uncomfortable, particularly for educators who are white and who are not system impacted, but the education system really is the first system that is going to catch these kids, the kids like me. Like, that's the first system we come up against. That's the first system that we're experiencing. And you want to make it a positive, at least, not even if a positive, but at least not a negative one for us. When I got into college, my experience was very, very different. I ended up getting my GED because I dropped out of high school, but I started community college when I was in my mid-20s, and my experience was very different. I talked with, one of my educators and told her about my experience, and she said, hey, like, we've been talking for an hour, and I'm just wondering, like, have you sought out, like, outside support? Like, the things I'm hearing sound like you've probably been traumatized by your parents' incarceration. And it's so funny because I had been reading all of this stuff on children of incarcerated parents, but it never occurred to me that I was traumatized. I thought, oh, look at all those kids out there traumatized, but it never occurred to me that I was traumatized, because it's a different thing to tap into that internalized trauma and to then process it. It's a very different thing than, like, sitting up here and, like, talking with people or working with children with incarcerated parents when your system impacted yourself. It's very hard to look in the mirror and look at how incarceration has impacted your life and how you can get better. And this person gently nudged me to get better, to seek out help. And that was the thing that helped me open up about my experience, was that one person sat down with me and took the time to really listen to me and very gently say, hey, like, you got this. Like, you got this. If you need support, I'm here. Definitely, like, find some resources to help you. I will help you. This person is, like, one of my dearest friends to this day, and we talk on the phone and we text and we send pictures of our cats, and it's not all about incarceration either. Like, she didn't just ask me about my experience being a child of an incarcerated parent. She asked me about my experience growing up in California, my experience with school, my experience with my hobbies. Like, I am a full, whole person, and she addressed me as a full, whole person with understanding that my parents' incarceration was this one, like this big part of me, but also this small part of me, because I am so much more than that. And I'll just say, I think college is very different than elementary, middle, and high school. I mean, we just know developmentally, kids, obviously you're different in college than you are when you're in 5th grade. That I don't need to go into why, everyone knows that. But when I think when you get to college, there are a lot of different resources available for children with incarcerated parents. I mean, we look at like the thing that Synovia started, the support groups and the fellowship with other children incarcerated parents. There are, you know, I know like UCLA and UC Berkeley and UC Santa Cruz, they have an underground scholars. At my school, they have an organization just for people that have been impacted by incarceration. There are a lot of scholarships out there. I think college is just a whole different world than, you know, earlier school years. And so I just want to acknowledge that even like our experiences are different, and in each stage of our education, our experiences are different. And so if you are an educator in working on one specific grade or stage of a child's educational experience, figure out what kids need at that stage, because it's going to vary. In college, I need financial support more than I need emotional support right now. That's just my experience, because my parent was incarcerated. I don't have family wealth supporting me in my education so I can finish college. That's just not a thing. Where when I was in high school, I needed more emotional support and probably still did need financial support. So I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I just want to acknowledge like how different our experiences are at each stage, and what educators can do to identify what kids need and then support them. And then I do want to say one more thing, because Synovia touched on it, and I didn't get a chance to say this earlier, is acknowledging the difference between informal and formal networks of support. And I think that those two things are very important and need to work together to support children with incarcerated parents. And I talk about formal being, you know, finding programs like Project What, like Pops the Club, you know, making referrals to, you know, mental health services, for, you know, CalFresh for kids that aren't getting enough food at home and like maybe need a little extra support that way. Like, there's these very formal networks, but the community aspect of it is just as important, if not equally important. And that's what Synovia was talking about. And I think for people that come from different cultures and people of color, maybe underestimate the collective well-being that like communities of color like really strive for. And so understanding the cultural differences too in how we support children, I think, is important. So that's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Alyssa. Addie, I'm curious to hear from you what it was like to go to Project What for the first time, and just to be around other young people that were different than you, of course, but also had experienced the incarceration of a parent.
I mean, it was the first time that I'd met other SIPs.
And when you say SIPs, what are you saying?
It was the first time I'd met other children of incarcerated parents. So it was definitely a new experience, but it was a positive experience. But it also made me realize how the differences of experience in children of incarcerated parents. For example, the prison where my dad was allowed contact visits. And I thought that was the norm until I heard the stories of the others.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about visiting and just being able to stay connected. What you know, what some of the challenges are, what your suggestions for how visiting could be, you know, how it could be changed and improved. And along with visiting, Anya, you touched briefly on the 15-minute phone call. Like, you know, people who haven't experienced the incarceration of a loved one don't even understand what that means, and how dehumanizing those calls can be when the messages start going off. So can you guys share a bit about maintaining relationships?
Okay, well, for like a very, very long time, I wasn't able to like physically send my dad a letter. And it would literally take me, like, I would receive letters from him and like put them somewhere like in my room, or like put them on like a counter or something, and I wouldn't open them. Like I would have like unopened letters that just kind of like piled up over time, and I just wouldn't read them because I was at that stage, like I was still very angry. I was still very upset because I felt like I felt abandoned. That's how I felt. And it was a really, really like terrible feeling. And you know, I learned from that because it's just I felt better. It felt better for me to try to maintain a relationship with my dad rather than like hold out on one and completely like shut him out. It took more energy for me to, you know, like do my best to pretty much remove him from my life than it took for me to just include him. And so I learned that, like, especially from my mental health, like it was, you know, it is a relief to get calls from him. But at the same time, it's also a reminder that he's in prison. And you know, this is an everyday thing that I have to like constantly battle with. And I think that people don't really understand like the, you know, the getting a pen and paper to talk to your parent, because, you know, 15 minutes really isn't going to cut it. Getting those like 4 or 5 reminders throughout your call that your call is about to end, like, I know, I know. I know it's a 15-minute call. You don't have to keep on saying you have 60 seconds. Now you have 30 seconds. Oh, now you have 15 seconds. Okay, that's great. Hearing the automated message, I literally have it memorized at this point. Literally have it memorized. Sending pictures is a very, very difficult thing because you have to run to CVS, run to Target, run up and down to get those pics. You have to figure out which pictures that you want, print them out, put them in an envelope, run to FedEx, and then ship them. So like all of those things. And then on top of like visitation, which is I only get to see my dad maybe once a year. And it's usually around like Thanksgiving time. And that is also very triggering for me because when Thanksgiving comes around, I'm all around my family, I'm happy, and then I have to leave, you know, my grandparents' house to drive 2 hours, dress in, you know, really long pants, sneakers. I don't wear long pants and sneakers, and long sleeve shirts, turtlenecks, and coats because why? Because they have a dress code. You can't wear, you know, shoes that show your toes. I like my Birkenstocks. What do you mean I can't wear my Birks? Like, what do you? This is an everyday thing, but like going through those metal detectors too. That's another layer of trauma that I have to go through throughout the years, and that's in addition to having my parent removed from my life. So all of those things, like it's another like battle that you have to constantly like just like work against, or like it's very difficult. I can't even begin to explain to you like the feelings, the amount of emotions that I feel when it comes time to visit, when it comes time to send a letter, to print out pictures, to answer the phone calls, because I know I'm going to hear an automated message before I hear the voice of my dad. And at the same time, I'd rather go through all that to have a relationship with my dad. but it doesn't make it any easier. All the, the hoops that I have to jump through to get to my dad. I think that's what's most painful for me. Like having to go through all these degrees of separation, physical separation, and then like why can't I just hear my dad's voice when he calls? Why do I have to sit through a minute of automated message before I can hear hello? Why do I have to get interrupted 4 times before me and my dad have to close out our conversation? Like it's those little things that really like affect us. And I don't think that, I don't think that, this system understands like the gravity of the situation. They're like, oh, this person did something wrong, we're going to punish them. But in turn, you're also punishing their children too. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything. And it's like I'm serving this sentence right beside my dad, even though I'm out, but I'm like this isn't freedom. This isn't what freedom looks like.
You just want to have a relationship with your dad, and the system is putting a lot of roadblocks and, as you said, hoops in your way. And so it's challenging enough to manage the emotions, but now you got to overcome all these systemic barriers, right? I mean, there's no reason why visiting can't be more family friendly. Phone calls should be longer. Phone calls should be free, right? Families should be able to stay connected. And there are campaigns, the Connecting Families campaign, which you can learn about on the CS Support Us website, is advocating for free phone calls so that Anya doesn't have to have that phone cut off at 15 minutes, right? Any other thoughts from the rest of the group about visiting or just other kind of systemic policy changes that are needed so that families are connected and you're better supported?
Allison, I just want to put in a quick plug. So there's a service called Emilio, and I'm just putting it in the chat right now. And Emilio offers free photo and letter mailing into any facility, any carceral facility in the United States. They're also working on the nation's first free video web conferencing platform to do video visits. I just want to encourage those on this call to check out their website. I put it in here. Again, it's a free service for families. So you don't have to do the thing that Anya is talking about where you run from one store to another to then mail it. Like it's literally an app, and you upload it and they send it for you, and it's completely free. And it's a phenomenal service. I want to put that in here. And I also just want to throw out too, like some what's going on, at least in California. I know this is a national conference, but what's going on in California, I think, is the information I have, and I want to share it because it's very compelling. So normal visiting has been canceled since March 11th. I have my notes right here, March 11th. Family visiting, which allows families to, visit overnight, has been canceled since March 14th. Okay. And then the CDCR partnered with GTL so that people can get 2 free 15-minute phone calls per month. So if you think about the time you can spend with your parent visiting or your loved one visiting, it's not comparable to 2 free 15-minute phone calls. And if you want any extra phone calls, the cost is upwards to $3.15 per minute, right? Like this is insane. It's profiteering off of family connection, and it's not okay. And so I like that you brought up, Allison, going to the CS Support Us website and looking at the campaigns and looking at the work of people who are pushing forward the rights of children to be connected with their parents, which means fighting against prison profiteering. Like it shouldn't cost $3.15 to talk to your family member per minute. That's per minute sometimes. If we can give 2 free phone calls during COVID, we can have free phone calls going forward, And I know that there's safety concerns for everyone involved as far as visiting goes, but we could do web visiting, we can do, camera visiting with loved ones. It's a problem. I want to give other panelists, yeah. I see you, Alexandra, in the chat. I want to give other panelists a chance to speak, but Allison, I also do want to speak a little bit too, because I've seen a couple questions in the chat and in the Q&A about what families are experiencing with COVID right now. So I'm going to mute myself and take a step back, but if I can have a few minutes to address what I've been hearing from families directly, just so those in the audience have that information and they can you guys can understand like the impact that COVID and this lack of visiting and the high cost of family connection, like how that is really impacting families right now. So I'm gonna take a step back, but if I could have a couple minutes before the end, that'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely, because I do want to touch on COVID and how you all are experiencing that and how it's affecting your education, your relationship with those on the inside, and for Anya with her dad still being inside during COVID, that's like. Is there anything else that people want to share as far as like systems change that is needed before we move into our discussion around COVID? All right, Alyssa, step back on in.
Okay, I have my notes up here because I want to do it justice. So like I said earlier in the call, our program mails books to children who have incarcerated family on behalf of their incarcerated family member. And the way that our process works is that myself and my volunteers have to call the guardians and the caregivers of the children on the outside so we can get all the information, like the mailing address and their birthday and blah, blah, blah. So in these conversations that are very, very challenging, I am hearing over and over and over again some recurring themes. And these are, like hundreds of conversations that myself and my staff have had. And one of the major things right now is parents are really struggling to manage online learning, distance learning with their kids and work, and just providing them general resources. I mean, I had a mother call me in tears because her 2 children are using her cell phone for online school because their school district does not have the money to provide them with tablets. So you look at a population that is already facing steep educational costs because they have an incarcerated parent, and then you add on what's happening with COVID, and that's creating even more problems because there's so many inequities in education in this country that one district can afford computers for their kids and another district can't. And we know that the district that can't is going to disproportionately have low income children of color, which we know are the demographic that have the most children, the most parents that are incarcerated. And so for me, I think what this looks like going forward as educators is like making sure not just your districts, but all the kids and all the other districts are getting the resources that they need, that they have tablets so they can do online learning. And also, how can we provide financial support? Because so many of these parents are also losing their jobs. I had a mom say, hey, I lost my job. I can't get another job because my kids are in school, or my kids aren't in school, and I need to stay here and help them with distance learning. So me and my 4 kids are going to move into a room in my family member's house, and that's where we're going to stay indefinitely because I don't know what's happening. And I think we're seeing people losing their jobs, like everyone is across the board. But when you have someone who's the sole provider for their child because the other person's in prison, that creates a whole bunch of problems. It's a cycle you can't get out of. You can't get a job because you don't have childcare, and then your kids are struggling with online learning because you don't have the resources to help them. So I just think if we want to break the cycles of incarceration, we really need to invest in the educational outcomes of children with incarcerated parents. And we need to make sure right now, especially during COVID, that that they're not falling behind even more. Like this is such a huge issue. So I just urge people on this call, like, find a way to like donate tablets to your local, school that needs them. Find ways to get books in the hands of children with incarcerated parents. If you're if you yourself are hiring someone, ask, be flexible with your employees in general right now. If you have someone who's struggling with childcare, you don't know their situation. I just think right now requires a lot of compassion for everyone, especially because children of incarcerated parents are an invisible population and they are struggling the most right now. and we need to acknowledge that. So I know I just threw a lot out there. Again, I'm gonna take a step back. I'll put some information in the chat as far as like some of the things that I've mentioned, and if anyone wants any more information about our program too, you can contact me.
Does anybody else want to share how COVID has affected them and concerns that they have for their incarcerated parent?
So my dad's back now, but his friend from prison got released like 4 months ago, and his friend had COVID. So his friend got released, but he can't see his family now. So I just wanted to add that.
I would say that for Project What, COVID has impacted us as far as us feeling more of like a family than like just a bunch of people who work together with this common experience. I'll let Addie correct me if I'm wrong, but for me personally, it's very impacted us because all of the work that we do is in person. And we're very adamant about always making sure that we are meeting in person or doing something actively within our community. So that's one way. And then personally, I have incarcerated loved ones still, and two of them I have not spoken to in almost 2 months now, and I don't even know why. So COVID has been making it even more difficult for me to figure that out. Uh, so yeah, I'm just worried that I'm not the only one with that issue, and I'm just trying to make sure that none of my youth are going through the same thing.
I'll be really quick. I have a younger cousin who her father is incarcerated right now. In New Jersey, the prison is like super far from us. It's about like 2 hours, I think. And they get phone calls a certain amount a week. I'm not really sure, but recently her father just was put into the infirmary because he was sick, and they couldn't call to see like if he was okay, if anything was going on. And it's a hard time for right now, like the caregivers, the children, everybody, because everyone's so stressed. Like no one knows what's going on inside. I believe his whole cell block had it at one point, and when you are all isolated, I can't even imagine what they're going through in there. So just it's a scary time.
I'd like to add here, I wasn't going to originally talk about this because it's still very fresh for me. This past summer, my brother passed. He was murdered, and he's my oldest brother, and my dad's oldest son, first son. It was really hard to deal with that when I couldn't even like be there physically to support my dad. And so I had to move across the country back to LA to start school again, because I knew that if I'd stayed home, I wouldn't have gone back to school. And so I had to move back without ever getting to see my dad first. And I haven't seen him in like almost a year, but it would have been especially helpful to be able to see him and talk to him in person about what our family is going through. So that's another way that COVID has definitely impacted my life right now. I can't be there for my dad, and he can't be there for me the way that he normally would. And with the things that are already happening in our community and society right now, the way that people are just dropping on the streets these days, COVID does not help. And I think that this whole like distrust that people have, not allowing like frequent phone calls to their family members. It's just not taking into account anything else that could be going on in that person's life outside of them being a prison, like outside of them being just another inmate, just another number. These aren't numbers. These are people that have lives outside of being your slave. They have things that they're dealing with outside of this cell that they have to come back to every single night.
Thank you for sharing, Anya, and sending your support and condolences through the airwaves. And, as you so poignantly just shared, that families need to be together and they need to remain connected. And young people need to be connected with their loved ones who are incarcerated inside so that there's healing. And until we change the systems, and we even look at why we're incarcerating so many people in the first place, we're going to continue to, the toll is going to continue to affect too many people in this country. We only have 2 minutes left, and I'm seeing a bunch of questions roll in now that we didn't get to. The conversation is going to continue throughout the day. This is only the beginning of a lot of discussions that you'll be able to throw some of these questions to panelists on the future workshops. But I would like to end on a bit of an uplifting note. So could each of you just kind of, and we didn't prep for this, so sorry for doing the drop on you, but just share us an accomplishment that you are proud of that has happened in your life.
Should I start?
Yeah, make it quick. We got 1 minute.
Okay. Graduating college, being the first to go to college and graduate.
Awesome.
I'll go next. I'm really passionate about wildlife science, so I've written several research papers on that subject.
Anya.
I feel like a big accomplishment for me was probably like getting into USC in the first place. I didn't think that would like happen for me, but like I'm really proud of that.
Alyssa.
I am so excited. I'm graduating this year. I found out I got into law school last week, and I got into a top law school in the country, one of the top 14. Woo woo. So I'm really excited for my next journey.
Awesome. Jakayla, take us out.
I am excited that you heard no renovations when I spoke and that I am moving out next month. So turn up for that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. And join SEO, support us. Visit the website. Bye.
I want to thank everybody for attending today. Panelists, I want you to know that I'm saving the chat for you just because there have been so many amazing supportive comments for each of you. I want you all to be able to see all of the love and support that you guys received while you were all talking. So I have saved those. Thank you for sharing your stories with us and trusting us all with that. And for everyone else, I will see you shortly at the next panel. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.